Hi Whovians, Harry here, and something big just happened in the most recent episode of Doctor Who. That is right, I am of course talking about the Richard E. Grant cameo in Rogue, because that was just crazy. Because to give you a bit of context, the Doctor activates Rogue's scanner to do a deep scan on him, and all of his past faces kind of circle around him. However, there is a face included that, shocked everyone, and that is, of course, the face of Richard E. Grant. So what does this all mean? Is he an incarnation of the Doctor that we've never seen before? Is he an incarnation that we have seen before? Is he even a Doctor? Well, that is what this video is going to go over. If you haven't seen my review of Rogue, check it out. I will link it up in the cards above, because it's also a kind of re-upload, because the upload to YouTube got messed up and it only uploaded like a third of the review. And actually, the first video I uploaded that was only like a third of the actual review cut off just before the I talked about this Richard E. Grant incarnation. So if you haven't watched my full review, go check that out. But before we get into what this all could mean, don't forget to subscribe, also leave a like and comment down below, and let's get into the video. So, I am going to be going over all the theories of what I think that this Richard E. Grant incarnation cameo could mean, starting with least likely to most likely. So, at number 1, least likely is the Curse of Fatal Death 10th Doctor. Now, if you don't know what the Curse of Fatal Death is, it is a 1999 comic relief story wrote by Stephen Moffat. Yes, that is right. From that point, the future showrunner, but at this point in time, the former showrunner, and most recently, he has wrote the episode Boom for this series of Doctor Who. So, of course, there's a lot of Moffatisms in this story. If you know what I'm talking about if you've seen his era. But basically, what this story entails is it follows the 9th Doctor, played by Rowan Atkinson, and his companion Emma, played by Julia Swaha. Hopefully, I'm pronouncing that correctly. But it follows them being trapped by the Master and the Daleks in just a short little episode. And then it follows the Doctor regenerating several times whilst trying to deactivate the Zetronic beam generator. And, of course, due to the title The Curse of Fatal Death, the Doctor goes through many regenerations while trying to deactivate this Zetronic beam generator. So it goes through from Rowan Atkinson to Richard E. Grant, then Jim Broadbent and Hugh Grant, and then finally Joanna Lumley, all playing the Doctor, with Rowan Atkinson being the 9th, and going through all of them to finally Joanna Lumley playing the 13th Doctor. But of course, what I want to zone in on is Richard E. Grant, who played the 10th version of this Fatal Death Doctor, because here we see him playing a Doctor. However, the reason why I think this is highly unlikely is the fact that the Curse of Fatal Death is almost straight away following on from the classic era of Doctor Who, because it is specifically stated by the Master that the Rowan Atkinson Doctor was only the 9th incarnation of the Doctor, and then it is stated through the times that Richard E. Grant is 10th, Jim Broadbent is 11th, Hugh Grant is 12th, and Joanna Lumley is 13. So, of course, this follows on from where Paul McGann left with his 8th Doctor. And, of course, this, does not follow any of what we saw later in New Who, because, of course, Christopher Eccleston revived the series as the 9th Doctor, with David Tennant being the 10th, Matt Smith being the 11th, then Peter Capaldi being the 12th, Jodie Whittaker being the 13th, David Tennant being the 14th, and Ncuti Gatwa being the 15th. So, of course, this does not follow anything of what New Who established as canon. This was just kind of a story for comic relief. And, of course, comic relief stories have never been canon in any way, shape or form. Because there was a comic relief story where I think Lenny Henry played like the Sixth Doctor or something, and of course we've had other comic relief related stuff like Red Nose Day had the 14th Doctor regenerate into... we had Lenny Henry regenerate into the 14th Doctor, which of course doesn't make any sense, and this is what kind of the Curse of Fatal Death turned into. It turned into something that, of course, Stephen Moffat wrote just for fun because Doctor Who was off the air. However, it later returned and basically scrapped everything that the Fatal Death did, and it was never really taken to be anything serious to begin with, really. So that is why it is the least likely on this list. So, moving past that, let's move into something a bit more concrete and a bit more to be taken seriously. So that is, number 2, the Shalka Doctor. So, the Shalka Doctor is the Doctor in the webcast Scream of the Shalka back in 2003, and that had Richard E. Grant playing the 9th Doctor, or more commonly known today, the Shalka Doctor. So, if you don't know what Scream of the Shalka is about it takes place an animated series on a webcast back in 2003 that had basically had the Time Lords being wiped out in a war or an alien invasion, a bit like the Last Great Time War from the 2005 revival onward, and the Master too had also died in this war. However, some of the Time Lords had survived, and the Doctor was working for them, and the Doctor and the Time Lords had also resurrected the Master, with his consciousness being transferred to an android body. Yes, it's weird. And basically it follows that outline with the Doctor being played by Richard E. Grant, being voiced by Richard E. Grant, and the Shalka Doctor being made to look like Richard E. Grant, and him basically travelling in the TARDIS with the android Master, and then him landing in 2003 in London and basically getting a new companion in this webcast. However, you might have heard that I mentioned that Richard E. Grant was playing the 9th Doctor in this webcast, because again, it carried on from where Paul McGann left off. And just like the Curse of Fatal Death, this does not work out, because it was shortly revealed after, I think, the first episode was released, or it was shortly revealed after the Scream of the Shalka was set to be released, that Doctor Who was returning to live action with Christopher Eccleston playing the 9th Doctor. So, again, this put the canonicity of Richard E. Grant's Shalka Doctor into, disrepute, because, of course, there couldn't be 2 9th Doctors, and of course the TV show takes precedent over everything else, with Richard E. Grant's 9th Doctor now falling out of being canon. And while it might have just been a incarnation that the 9th Doctor didn't want to be called the Doctor, it kind of throws that into disrepute, because it has never been mentioned at all. It has, been put into, it never happened. The show, I think Russell T Davies didn't even like Scream of the Shalka, and it has never been mentioned before by Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, or Chris Chibnall at all before Rogue. So it kind of makes that the Shalka Doctor shouldn't be considered canon, or this incarnation of Richard E. Grant shouldn't be the one that it was in Rogue, because it just overlaps too much with Christopher Eccleston being the 9th Doctor, that none of it makes any sense whatsoever, especially with all the Big Finish adventures we have seen with Christopher Eccleston. And also in Day of the Doctor, when it very clearly showed John Hurt regenerating into Christopher Eccleston. So, unfortunately, I don't think this is the Shalka Doctor either. Number 3, the Great Intelligence. Now, this one is one that I quite like. So, back in Series 7B of Matt Smith's final era as the Doctor, Richard E. Grant appeared in 2 episodes of Doctor Who, being The Bells of St. John and Name of the Doctor. He had also appeared in the 2012 Christmas special as Walter Simeon. However, what I want to talk about is when he played the Great Intelligence, which again is carrying on from The Snowman. But Richard E. Grant was kind of the Great Intelligence, and in The Name of the Doctor, he stepped into the Doctor's time stream, becoming part of the Doctor's history. So it would kind of explain why he is in the Doctor's faces, because he has become part of the Doctor's history. Because he stepped into the Doctor's time stream, he changed a lot of the Doctor's history, and even though Clara eventually fixed what the Great Intelligence was doing to the Doctor's timeline and the Doctor's history, he could still kind of be in the Doctor's time stream, just hidden away, being put in his place by Clara. However, this wouldn't explain why Clara or the 11th Doctor wouldn't be shown in these faces. Yes, I know Matt Smith appeared in the faces, the 11th Doctor appeared in the faces, but he should appear twice if he stepped into his time stream, and Clara should also appear in these faces if the faces that are going around is what the Great Intelligence, is what the Richard E. Grant cameo was for, was referring to the Great Intelligence. Because if Richard E. Grant is included in this list because he stepped into the Doctor's time stream, then also Clara should be included, and the 11th Doctor should have 2 faces circling around Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor. However, Clara isn't included, and the 11th Doctor is only included once, which kind of puts Richard E. Grant's Great Intelligence, this theory, into that it probably isn't the Great Intelligence. And another thing that kind of shoots this theory down is that through this logic, the Master should also have been included in these faces because he force regenerated the 13th Doctor into the Master in the episode The Power of the Doctor. So, unfortunately, I don't think it's the Great Intelligence, which is a shame because I quite like this theory. However, number 4, the Timeless Child. Yes, number 4, the most likely, I think, is that Richard E. Grant is a timeless child, pre-Hartnell version of the Doctor, just like the Fugitive Doctor, who is also shown in these faces in Rogue in this scene. And it just works so well, because who says that Richard E. Grant wasn't a face that the Doctor regenerated into before William Hartnell? Because it just works so well. Yes, all the other ones have caveats with them, like the Curse of the Fatal Death 10th Doctor. Like, there's another 10th Doctor played by David Tennant that is more canon than that. Also, the 9th Doctor in Scream of the Shalka, there is another 9th Doctor played by Christopher Eccleston that is more canon. And the Great Intelligence, why isn't Clara and the 11th Doctor again seen in these faces, as well as the Master? However, the Timeless Child puts all of these matters to bed. Because we have never seen when the pre-Hartnell Doctors adopted the moniker of Doctor. It could have been the Fugitive Doctor, it could have been the Richard E. Grant Doctor, it could have been a Doctor that we've seen through the Timeless Child, it could have been a Doctor that we have never seen before. But Richard E. Grant being a Timeless Child Doctor just makes so much sense, because there is an unlimited amount of time where Richard E. Grant could be the Doctor before the Doctor eventually became William Hartnell, became the first Doctor that we all know. because it just works so well. It doesn't even have to, the Richard E. Grant doesn't even have to be the 9th Doctor in the first regeneration cycle or the 10th Doctor in the first regeneration cycle. The regeneration cycle might not even matter to the Doctor because he is the foundation of Time Lord DNA, because he could just go on regenerating again and again and again. We know the Doctor has already gone through 2, possibly 3 regeneration cycles. So, it just makes a lot of sense that the Richard E. Grant cameo in this episode points to Richard E. Grant being a timeless child incarnation of the Doctor. But that is just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of this theory. Do you think that Richard E. Grant is a Curse of the Fatal Death Doctor, a Screamer for Shalka Doctor, the Great Intelligence, or a Timeless Child Doctor? Or do you think that he is something else? Let me know down in the comments below. And also, if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, also subscribe, and share it out. And I will see you in the next one.